Hey, it's Jordan Chariton here with Beat the Press. We're doing a little video podcast here. This is like my third podcast ever, so roll with me with the tech stuff. I got a microphone in front of me. I don't know if you can see it. And since this is the early days of this media revolution, I don't have a soundproof studio. So you might hear a couple of sirens and ambulances in New York City, but hopefully you could hear. I'm here with Anthony Clark. You were a candidate for the 7th District in Illinois. The Democratic primary, I believe, was last week. Unfortunately, you were not victorious, but I think actually, in many ways, there were some positive things that came from your campaign. You were facing Danny Davis. He's a congressman. He's been in office for 20 years. Just talk about, sorry to rub it in, but just so the audience has it, the results was 73-26. So, hey, Bernie lost a few times first. So let me ask you before we get into the loss. Remind people who don't know you were a Justice Democrat candidate. You're a U.S. military veteran. You're a special education teacher. Talk to me about just what your experience was. I know you might feel differently in a few weeks with more perspective, but even though you weren't victorious, what was your experience like in this kind of progressive uprising running against the establishment?
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you having me on. Definitely, love your work. Glad to see you back and doing our thing. So for me, like you stated, I'm a military veteran. So I was born and raised essentially in the 7th Congressional District. So the 7th District is what I've known essentially all my life since the age of 5 years old. Graduated high school, went into the military, served 6 years active duty. When I exited the military due to a disability, I have PTSD and also what's known as Behçet's disease. It's in the family of like Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis. So I was medically discharged honorably. Went through the Troops and Teachers program, became a special education teacher. So I've been teaching special ed for 9 years, all within the 7th Congressional District. From there, I formed my own nonprofit. So I'm the founder and director of my own nonprofit, Suburban Unity Alliance. I'm also a co-owner of a small business that employs at-risk youth within the 7th. So essentially my entire life, everything that I've done in my life outside of military service has been focused and entrenched in the 7th Congressional District. So I know the 7th, like the 7th, I bleed the 7th. I fight for the 7th. So essentially from the work that I've done, as a teacher, I believe that you work outside of 9 to 5. You don't clock in and clock out of being a teacher. So, building relationships with students and families, working within the community, being an activist, a community organizer. From there, expanding it into starting my nonprofit, Suburban Unity Alliance, where we focus on, bridging equity gaps, fighting for equality. We've done everything from, help push the most progressive welcoming village ordinance in the nation in Oak Park, Illinois, to, hosting free financial literacy courses at local institutions for youth and family, to paying for, scholarships, groceries, rent, so on and so forth, being trained on filling out DACA renewals, helping dreamers complete their DACA renewal applications. So we've done, literally everything, because I feel like the issues that we face are interconnected, so they require interconnected solutions. And I've always been the type of person, man, that just feels like I'm never doing enough. My grandpa Chum, God rest his soul, he was a huge Ali fan. He used to say, service to others is the rent you pay for room here on the earth. So how you paying rent? Tony V, that's what he used to call me. So that's always in my mind, like, how am I paying rent? So being a teacher wasn't enough. So I formed a nonprofit. Doing that work wasn't enough. So, I created a small business, co-owner of a small business. And it seemed like it happened when it was supposed to, like it was almost a calling. In a sense, it is a calling, where I was thinking in my head, I'm not paying enough rent, because the stuff that I'm doing right now, to me, is essentially, treating symptoms, like putting a Band-Aid over an open wound. I'm not changing anything systemically. So what more can I do? And I got an email, around that time period from Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress stating that, multiple individuals in the community had nominated me to run for office. At first, I was like, hell no, I'm not a politician. I'm not the political type. But, long story short, I accepted the nomination. And we were boots to the ground, 100% grassroots, individual donations, just continuing to essentially expanding the work I was already doing, as running a nonprofit, a small business, and teaching. So it was a great experience. We got to this point where we did lose, but as my students say, I took a L, or we took a L. But I look at taking this L as a win, honestly, because if you look at Illinois, I mean, we have high corruption in Illinois. The machine is entrenched. You can holler at it and thank Mike Madigan for that. So just getting my feet wet, and just learning, seeing the intricacies of politics, seeing the ins and outs and what we should have done better, what we can improve on, what we can eliminate and don't have to focus on and worry about. Like, I'm already ready for 2 years, bro. I mean, if you look at Mary Newman, she was another Justice Democrat. She ran up against Lipinski. Samina Mustafa, she ran up against Quigley. David Gill. We had so many progressives running in Illinois. I mean, even, I was supporting essentially Daniel Biss for governor, but, progressives took a L. But I think as a whole, it's a win because I think we've sent notice and, we're going to move forward, man. We got to change Illinois.
And before I get to my next question, I just want to point out I was actually in special ed from first to third grade. So a lot of kudos to you because that is a really, really tough job and really, really underappreciated, I think, special education teachers. So kudos to you for that.
You as well. You as well.
So I want to ask, you briefly mentioned it. I've been around the country to, at this point, 32 states the last 2 years. Illinois is a whole nother planet in terms of corruption, and specifically the Chicago area. And I think what a lot of people don't know, the focus on Bernie and national politics is on the state level. A lot of these states, I mean, the entrenchment of the Democratic Party establishment is widespread. Can you kind of talk about what your experience was? Obviously, you didn't have the name recognition of a congressman who's older, was representing that district for 20 years. But I saw your tweets. I saw your pictures. I mean, you were out there more than anyone else in terms of, demonstrating peacefully and grassroots organizing and all this. What were you facing? Maybe some of it you don't want to talk about, some of it you can. What were you facing? Because we saw, basically deceptive mailers being sent out by party bosses there in Illinois. And there's a lot we didn't see. What kind of stuff were you facing? Because I think a lot of candidates are facing this around the country.
Right, definitely. And I mean, and again, I believe in being transparent and as open as possible. And one of the things we did throughout the campaign was expose a lot of the things we were facing, because we wanted to educate the public and the community. Because what's interesting to me, again, I'm not a negative person. I didn't run a negative campaign. I didn't do any attack acts, so on and so forth. I ran on who we were, the movement. But it's interesting how incumbents on the surface present themselves, as stately, as individuals that support the democratic process, are in love with democracy, and, are open to any and everyone running for office because that's what a true republic is. That's what a true democracy is. But, what so many of the public don't understand, and I mean, I get it because we're focused on life. We have bills to pay, jobs, children to raise. Not everybody has the time to truly dig deep and see, lift that veil and see what's going on behind the scenes. But almost immediately, it was interesting when I announced my candidacy. And like you stated, we do this. Like, we're out in these streets. Like, we're grinding. Like, this is nothing new. I care about the community. I'm not running for power. I didn't run, to get a name out there, to run for the hell of it, to say, oh, I could be at a bar one night and be like, hey, I ran for office. Like, this was real. Like, I ran because I care about changing this community. And so many areas in Illinois are just under devastation currently. Yeah. So, again, I think it's interesting how, many of the incumbents, particularly in Illinois, in regards to when they're facing a challenger, they present themselves as stately. They present themselves as supporting the democratic process, as believing in a democratic republic. Perfect example, when I announced my candidacy, newspapers approached the incumbent, Danny K. Davis, and he stated, oh, he welcomes the challenge. He's excited for it. But almost immediately after myself announcing, the underhanded backroom tactics started, from intimidating phone calls. The incumbent himself called me and stated, I was going to embarrass myself. I'm not even going to make the ballot. I need to drop out and, really think about what I'm doing. And do I have a lawyer? Will I be able to afford a lawyer? Because what happened was, we have to collect signatures. We're in Illinois. You have to collect signatures to get on the ballot. So don't quote me, but I believe we have to collect roughly 1,356. So I turned in, almost 3,000. I mean, this was like, I'm still working full time, mind you. I work at the school full time, still run my nonprofit, but off of work, weekends, we have wonderful volunteers out there, boots to the ground. So we collected all these signatures. Like, we did this the right way. But what happens is, we turned in our petitions. They challenged them. So to a grassroots candidate like me, who $1,000 means everything, it cost me $10,000 to hire a lawyer. Shout out to Ed Mullen in Chicago, wonderful lawyer, supports a lot of progressive candidates. But that process lasted 2 months. So from the time we turned in our signatures, we had 2 months where we essentially weren't officially on the ballot. So you can imagine how that impacts your race in a sense, because I mean, even newspapers, even the media, they're not necessarily going to approach you like you're an official candidate, because they don't know if you're going to actually make the ballot. So a lot of people aren't even, they don't even know if they can take you seriously yet. So he initially challenged my signatures. They put forward, I mean, just the general, just motion. Just they threw out basically SHIT on the wall to see what would stick. It was garbage challenge. We defeated that. But then that wasn't enough. That took about a month to defeat. Then they filed a Rule 8 motion, and they stated that myself and my mother, Blanche Clark, who I mean, is my queen. She's the ultimate ride or die. Blanche does not play when it comes to her son. She was out there with me, but they challenged us, stating that we were not the petition collectors. So we were not actually out there collecting signatures. So that was their next tactic, to file a Rule 8 motion. So that took another month of us not officially being on the ballot. Now, mind you, there was a third person that was running, a third person that announced their candidacy and turned in their petitions. They actually were knocked off the ballot because they could not afford, a lawyer. They could not afford a proper defense. They tried to defend themselves. So we survived that. But again, that's 2 months of time that I have to spend with my lawyer, time that I have to spend going up to the courthouse, going up to the Board of Elections to try to figure out, what we need to do to correctly and appropriately defend our petitions. That's money spent that could have been used on advertising, that could have been used on so much more, because again, the incumbent himself stated, I'll never forget, we held a meeting in the Austin community, and he crashed it. And he came in and was just like, literally told me to my face, I mean, other people were there, you're not going to win. And he didn't say I wasn't going to win because he was better. He didn't say I wasn't going to win because he had the answers to, the issues that are facing our district. He literally stated, I have 20 years of name recognition and I have money. You're not going to win. So after we made the ballot, I mean, now, right. I mean, no, it was serious. And I mean, it's even the nuance involved. So we make the ballot, but then along the way, we're pushing for debates, right? Like we want to debate. We want to, be face to face with the incumbent to show the public, to show the community, who we believe is the better, representative of this district. But it was even interesting to see how many, like the Democratic organizations, part of the machines, they essentially ignored us. Like I would literally be messaging, like, Democratic parties about Park and so on and so forth. Like, hey, can you at least hold a forum? Can you call something? Because I'm challenging him. I actually, I know I'm all over the place, but literally everything. Like I walked the entire district from Inglewood to downtown Chicago, all the way to essentially Maywood, right outside of Westchester. And along that walk, the next day, I went to the incumbent's office and provided him a letter challenging him to debates. Because it was important to me. So throughout this entire process, we only had 2 times where we're in front of each other. The first time was because the committee woman who called for the forum, is essentially, they're part of the establishment. They work together, so it was his people. He felt comfortable. So he came out, he did his thing. I mean, the article was written. I clearly was, the progressive choice. I was talking of change at this forum. He stated, I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing for 20 years. And I was like, okay. And from that, then we had another one. But the one we had after pressure and pressure, local indivisibles finally called for a gun forum, a gun debate. About the gun violence and answers to it. And I mean, we filmed this, but it was literally 2 days before the primary. You know what I'm saying? So not a lot of people saw it, but we were the clear candidate. I mean, it was clear. Everybody was responding like, wow, your candidate in the race to receive the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense distinction. All the progressive, organizations for the most part endorsed me. But again, that nuance, they were stealing our signs because of name recognition. We will put down yard signs. Yard signs are expensive as hell. We put these down in various communities when we will be door knocking. They literally would take up our signs every week, like take them up, pull them up, like rip them up. We had like a glorious one. I was so proud. Like my face was on it like this, and it was like Anthony Clark and had our messaging. Like they literally cut it and like ripped it off. Right, his campaign. I mean, it happened in other races as well to, progressive candidates going against incumbents, so on and so forth. But primarily in my campaign, it was his campaign doing it. And I'm the type of person where, I'm straightforward. So I remember seeing them, and I saw one of his, assistants, and shook their hand. I was like, man, you got to be real tired right now. And they were like, why? I was like, man, you're taking all our signs up. And again, it was funny. They didn't deny it. He was like, well, that's how it goes in Chicago. No, that's not how it's supposed to go. I don't feel like that's how it's supposed to go in democracy. I didn't challenge you. I didn't challenge your petitions because I believe it should be the voice of the people, the selection of the people who chooses who represents them, not knocking people off before they get their message out. And I didn't take up any signs. Because again, run on your platform, run on your energy, run on what you're trying to do for the district. So they essentially admitted it, that they took my signs. The incumbent was like, well, I didn't do it, but he could have, like literally said that. And I'm just like, really? So we have to deal with that, so basically a blackout, it was a gubernatorial race going on, but the media, they didn't pay a lot of attention to a lot of the other races, rightfully so. Mary Newman's race against Lipinski got a lot of media coverage, and rightfully so. But even if you look at that, progressive candidate fighting, lost to an incumbent, Lipinski, who had that name recognition and a lot of underhanded tactics that were at hand. So we dealt with, signature challenge. We dealt with the Rule 8 motion, challenging ourselves as petition collectors. And, doubling back to that, again, I remember being in court and, I mean, his representatives literally lying, stating that, oh, we never saw Anthony Clark. And they will present affidavits, and this was what funny is about it, Jordan. They presented affidavits that were not, that had the signature of the notary, but they were third-person affidavits. So they would literally present, this person was there when we talked to an individual that signed Anthony Clark's petition, and this individual said Anthony Clark wasn't present. But they didn't actually have the individual sign, the affidavit. They had a third person say, oh, I overheard this conversation. So, of course, this evidence was thrown out. But then they had people come in as witnesses that were literally just making stuff up. Like, oh, it was literally one woman said, and again, I love everyone. I love all sizes. This is not about that. But she literally was like, well, a 350-pound man was out there collecting my signature. So stuff like that, it was just weird. So just the blackouts, being shut off by, I guess, the Democratic establishment, not having opportunities to even get myself and the message out there to a lot of voters, being challenged, trying to get knocked off the ballot, our signs being stolen, our advertisements being stolen, getting calls, getting messages of harassing natures, just telling us to, jump out the race. So things of that, just the cycle of it, and just them banking off of name recognition.
You know what I find interesting here? I was on the trail covering Bernie. Obviously, we know what happened in 2016. That's where really people got woken to how rigged things are on a national level. And when we talk about rigged as far as 2016, we're talking about, the media calling Iowa when Bernie's he's losing by like 1/10 of a point, or right. 2/3 of polling stations being closed down in Rhode Island, and Maricopa County closing, I think, 60 or 70% of them. And all the tactics that went on in this rigged system, of course, the DNC essentially working against Bernie Sanders. But what you're talking about is the more micro level rigging on a local level, which is how does someone, whether he's a young guy like you or even an older candidate, because there's a lot of women that are running now, maybe in their 30s, 40s, it seems rigged for the incumbent and the establishment and the police on the force who would be overseeing these underhanded tactics, like stealing your yard signs or straight up lying in court. I mean, the police on the beat seem to be in bed with the incumbent candidates.
Yeah, no question. I mean, again, it's so nuanced in the sense of like you even had. So I ran for committeeman as well, committee person, and I ran with like a slate of endorsed committee persons, progressive. And I mean, you even had like Michael Madigan, sending out mailers even on that side. So you had my congressional run where I was, dealing with being, having blackouts.
Sorry to cut you off, but I just want to explain to the audience because
Oh,
tell me, Mike Madigan, I know who he is. He's the party boss there, very frankly corrupt. Can you tell the audience about Mike Madigan?
yeah, Mike Madigan. I mean, if you like old mafia movies, that's how I essentially describe him, man. Like he's just a old school Democratic mafioso. He's a Speaker of the House in Illinois. I mean, he's been in office, he's been in power for decades and decades, and I mean, he's entrenched basically. I mean, nothing happens essentially without his blessing. Like he's a king maker, queen maker, so on and so forth. So he has a lot of influence. And essentially, I mean, to sum it up, to show how corrupt it is, for listeners, look up Joe Barrios. So Joe Barrios was our Cook County assessor, extremely corrupt in regards to how he was assessing property taxes. Property taxes are a huge issue in Illinois. So somehow, finally, he was exposed, and everybody was like up in arms. So Fritz Craigie actually won. He beat Joseph Barrios. But you cannot tell me this is the first time anyone knew that he was underassessing the value of wealthy individuals' homes and overassessing the value of middle class and lower middle class. This is the first time anybody knew about it. But Michael Madigan is a property tax lawyer as well, so he makes his money off of property taxes. So I mean, it's just corruption. It's just deep corruption. So Michael Madigan sent out mailers, essentially attacking the progressive, central committeemen and committee women, committee persons that were running, against incumbents. Because again, if you're a committee person, you have some influence in the sense of, again, how the messages get out there, who's being slated, forums, debates, so on and so forth, like basically bringing together your Democratic Party and locally and abroad. So that was huge for them. So you have that. And then if you look at the Tribune and the Sun-Times, literally, I mean, they went with and endorsed all the incumbents. Like, come on, I mean, it's just a heavy infiltration of machine politics. I mean, J.B. Pritzker just bought the election. Yeah. Basically, you have to look at who owns them. I mean, there's so many different connections in a sense. So for young progressives, I can't speak for other states, other areas, because I'm supporting this progressive movement. I'm so proud of many of the JDs and brand new Congress candidates that have won their primaries in other states. I'm going to be supporting them. But in Illinois, like you stated earlier, I mean, it really is a different animal. It's hard to truly, capture it and truly understand the level of nuance that exists of how progressives are just at every step, at every turn, the decks are stacked against us in a sense. But there's no excuse. We're going to continue on. When I lost, I put on some Tupac, listened to some Machiavelli, got my head right, and we're gonna be back. And I hope Mary and so many others are back as well.
So I want to ask you. Obviously, I mean, there's no other way to say it. It was definitely rigged. The deck was stacked against you. I'm glad to hear that. A lot of candidates, when they lose, it takes a little while for most people. You take your lumps. You're depressed or frustrated or angry, and you seem to be already very positive, focused on what you could do now, as well as maybe even running. But moving away from the election, in the media, we hear a lot about the Rust Belt as far as Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Don't hear that much about Illinois, only because it's a reliably, on the national level, Democrat. Democrats win on the national level, especially for president. But, I was astounded. I did this disappearing middle class tour when I was still at 2IT. We went Pennsylvania to Ohio to Michigan to Illinois to Wisconsin in very few days. And Illinois, I think, like Ohio, like Michigan, is a real microcosm for everything that's wrong with this country. Obviously, we're not going to be looking for the current president to help fix it. But can you kind of talk about how Illinois, not just Chicago, but greater Illinois, has been just economically devastated from the trade deals, rezoning? Talk about, what inspired you to run in the first place and what issues are still facing Illinois.
So for those who don't know, you can look it up. The data exists. Illinois actually led the nation in individuals moving out of the state this past year. I mean, people are leaving in droves. Illinois has a flat state tax, flat tax system, which is inequitable. I mean, which is creating a lot of huge issues. The state of Illinois, again, we didn't have a spending budget for X number of years. Our public school systems are underfunded. Many of them are closing, particularly in the Chicagoland area, because, of course, as most of us realize, property taxes fund our school systems, which is inequitable as well. Rahm Emanuel, our current mayor, sorry about that. I have to make a face when I say his name. But he's led the push for privatization of our educational systems. Whether that's charter schooling, whether that's privatizing industries that serve our schools in regards to food services, janitorial services. That's creating a lot of huge issues because money is being siphoned away from our public schools in regards to pushing for school choice. There's so many different things to talk about in Illinois. I mean, right now, I just attended a nurses union rally, a National Nurses United Union rally in regards to, I believe it's called Fair Choice. So Supreme Court case that's going on in regards to essentially union busting. First choice, in regards to union busting, where you can opt out of paying your union dues. Because again, they're attacking the individual and they want to convince the individual that you'll save a few money here and there. But then that's, again, the power of our unions. They're being eroded. It's being eroded. The power to collective bargain. So there's so many issues within Illinois, from property taxes to our school systems, to a lack of budget. We did pass a budget, but still, imagine years and years we're going with many of our services not being paid or being underfunded. That creates huge issues. So again, many people are moving out of the state. The primary reason why I ran, the 7th Congressional District is huge. I think we know the issue with gerrymandering. You can literally cross a street and everything changes within the 7th Congressional District. You can go from utter devastation to relative opportunity. But what happens is I truly believe that the health of one community directly impacts the health of other communities. So you have the communities within the 7th, like the Austin community, like Inglewood, like back at the yards, where you have so many different people fighting and loving their community, fighting for it on a grassroots level. But because of a choke off of funding, because of a lack of funding, they're in utter devastation. And it's inevitable if one community is in utter devastation, it's going to bleed over and impact all communities within that district. And that's what you have now. And within the 7th, you have communities like Oak Park, which is, upper middle class, high property taxes, which again is forcing some people out. But now the issues that occur in Austin, which is right next to Oak Park, now it's impacting Oak Park as well, because we haven't had those bridges built. We haven't had investment in all of our communities to support our communities. So I ran due to that, due to the lack of investment in so many of our communities, due to school closures, due to mental health facility closures, due to lack of opportunity overall. Gun violence, is running rampant. The current president constantly has named Chicago when he engages in fear mongering. So for me, and right now we have a Republican governor, Bruce Rauner, who, just vetoed, we tried to pass, new common sense gun legislation, which had universal background checks tied into it. He vetoed that. So it's so much going on within Illinois. Yes, another billionaire. So he'll be going against J.B. Pritzker, the Democratic billionaire who essentially bought the election. Daniel Biss, the progressive candidate, came in second, and Chris Kennedy came in third. But again, it's systemic. And the one message that I want to send people, I think it's easy to be a loud person in the room with other people that are yelling. Like, it's easy to point the finger at Trump, and the GOP. And I understand, yes, there are issues, but realize the issues that we face are systemic. So they've existed for years, and years. Donald Trump is a byproduct. He's a symptom. And many of these symptoms and systemic issues that we face have been under Democratic leadership. So it's not just the GOP. It's not just Trump that we have to look at. As a Democratic Party, we also have to look ourselves in the mirror and see where our leadership has not led us in that progressive, in that right direction. Many of our Democratic leaders want to maintain status quo because it benefits them personally, or it benefits the party, but not the people. And it's inevitable when you maintain status quo, you're going to regress. You're not going to move forward. Things are going to get worse. And that's what we're seeing in Illinois right now. It's an utter devastation. And that's why for me, I have to run again. This is not an option. It's a calling. There's no other choice. I have to for the people of this district. to truly put people before politics and profit. We need fighters out there, and that's what I am.
I want to. It's a good segue actually because um, when I do get back out there in the field, and for the audience, if you know what I've been working on behind the scenes, I'm working on launching a new company. These podcasts are free, but if you want to listen to other podcasts that are premium and other content, it's patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. That will get me back in the field, hire other reporters. After that plug, you talk about Democratic leaders. I want to do a gentrification tour when I get back on the field. I mean, Chicago is like the head of the class of the effects of gentrification. I was in Chicago several times during the 2016 campaign. And really what Democrat Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who is also credited with the Democrats' triumphant retaking of the House in 2006, I mean, he has really beautified I don't know what, 10-block radius in Chicago. Right. The Riverwalk, which I ain't gonna lie, it's beautiful when you're there. It's fantastic if you have the money. You could have a beer or a good meal on the water over the summer. It's very nice. But he has done this, spending so much money on that, essentially driving people who were already poor further out and leaving the rest of Chicago to rot. And we're starting to see this all over the country. Can you kind of talk about the devastating effects of that gentrification?
Yeah, no question. I mean, Chicago, like for any tourist that comes in, like if you rent a divvy bike, one of those rental bikes, and you ride around, like it's no joke. Like you could quickly find yourself in the area and you'll be concerned because literally you could cross a street or cross a block or cross a bridge and everything changes. Our current mayor, our current political establishment, they focused on, the Navy Piers, the Magnificent Mile, the shopping areas, downtown Chicago, Gold Coast area. They put in a lot of money, a lot of TIFs, have been created and money's been funneled in, a lot of development. But all those communities surrounding, downtown Chicago, for the most part, are in utter devastation. And I'm not joking. Like I said earlier, I literally walked the entire district. I've saw it firsthand for myself. Vacant homes, vacant lots, trash everywhere, violence everywhere. And you have people truly fighting and asking for help and, boots to the ground trying to make a difference. But they don't even have funding for many of these grassroots organizations that exist that are truly doing the work. Because I think, we don't have to go through a history lesson, but I think we understand when white flight occurred. Jim Crow laws existed, white flight occurred, redlining occurred, where, whites left, predominantly white individuals left the city and moved into the suburban areas. And then that pushed, blacks and other minorities into the city. But now this is prime real estate. Now you have individuals, I want to live, by the river. I want to live by Navy Pier, so on and so forth. So now it's reversing. Illinois as a whole, we just shout out to 25th Ward IPO and Pilsen Alliance and organizations that I work with. Right now, Illinois is a state that basically has a ban on rent control. Perfect example of that. So if you have a ban on rent control, that essentially means without rent control that, owners of property, so on and so forth, can raise rent as they see fit. That forces individuals out of communities because they become too expensive. So again, with violence, not only lowering property value, and then it gets bought up and individuals are forced out. The individuals that are currently in the communities, there's a ban on rent control. Thankfully, that's been placed on the ballot to vote on. And hopefully, I think we're going to get to the point where we vote to lift that ban on rent control. But that's, again, there's so many nuances. Rahm Emanuel, he's basically launched a war against our homeless population. Homelessness is a huge issue nationally, but particularly in Chicago, our homeless veterans, so on and so forth. And then it's not that narrative that exists where, we have a lot of homeless individuals, community members that actually work, that are actually engaged in their communities, but they struggle at times and they need support. But he's closed down tent cities due to developments. He's forced our homeless populations out of the city, basically pushing them, further west or out of the city. So it's a huge issue. These developments are going up. Rent and mortgages are astronomical. If you look at the Logan Square area, I used to live in Logan Square. In 6 years, Logan Square has completely different. The individuals that grew up in Logan Square, that new Logan Square, that are Logan Square, are no longer in the community because, again, property value lowered. It was purchased up. New developments go up, which increase property value, force individuals out of the community. I mean, I'm going to end it here. It's so nuanced. Even the Obama presidential library that's being talked about being developed is creating a lot of rifts and issues because many people feel once that library is built, it's going to impact property value, property taxes are going to rise, and then how is that going to negatively and adversely impact, our middle class, lower middle class, and poor individuals that are in the surrounding community and area that the library is built in. Again, it's forcing people out, and we're not doing enough to support our middle class, families, our lower middle class families, and poor families. Gentrification is a huge issue. I make a joke when you go into a community and you see a Starbucks or a Divvy bike, those rental bikes start going up. It's time. It's gentrifying. People are being forced out.
Add Whole Foods to that.
Yeah, Whole Foods too, definitely.
So, I want to get to the gun issue because to me, I mean, of course, it's the easy conservative talking point. You actually hear it from some Democrats too. Well, forget the mass shootings. What about Chicago? Well, they never talk about why there is so much damn gun violence in Chicago. I mean, I'm not an African American, so I'm not going to act like I could totally understand it. But the bottom line is, it's not like these people killing each other are doing it because they just watched The Terminator. I'd love to know your thoughts, but my view is, why don't we talk about there's terrible education there. Mm-hmm. They can't get jobs. To put food on the table, they have to, do things like sell drugs, things like that. You never hear that, even when CNN talks about this. Can you kind of talk about, the gun violence there? To me, it's not the gun. Obviously, it is a crisis, but it's not directly related to, Chicago. These people are bad, but what is driving them to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my quotes, and I truly believe this, is nothing stops a bullet like opportunity. Like, I truly believe that. In the gun crisis, gun violence, there's an interconnected issue. And what happens is, particularly on the Democratic side, again, it's easy to look at Republicans. Yes, we know the influence of the NRA, so on and so forth. But on the Democratic side, what happens is the easiest answer is to just state that we need greater legislation. We need more legislation. Yes, legislation is important. Pushing for common sense gun reform and common sense gun legislation is extremely important. But again, we need to create opportunity in our communities as well. They coincide with each other. We don't have our current political leadership. They're not stating that because, again, that means working hard. That means that there's no quick answer. It's no quick solution because these issues are systemic. We have multiple school closures within the Chicagoland area. We have, the 7th Congressional District right now, even including the suburban areas like Oak Park, we're at a 16.5% unemployment rate. Within the 7th Congressional District, you have about 83% of individuals that graduate high school, but only about, 37% attend and graduate college. So that's a large percentage of individuals. Yes, college is not for everybody. College should not be the only answer or the only narrative to success. But we don't tie in vocational and trade programs within our high schools. We're not bringing in, job creation in regards to supporting small business opportunities, pushing for and supporting co-ops, so on and so forth, entrepreneurships. How can we bring businesses back? How can we bring job and opportunities back? How can we support our school systems before and after school programs? Even the war on drugs. I feel like the war on drugs is racist. I was the candidate who I'm 100% in support of the legalization of cannabis. Because I believe right now it's a negative opportunity that exists, that many of our youth are dying over drug territories. If we legalize, that would not only identify and allocate millions and millions of dollars to bring into our communities, and if allocated effectively, we could invest in our underserved communities, but it will also bring in medical benefits as well as social benefits, because the small business that I co-own, again, many of them state that we work with, their number one opportunity prior to working for us was selling drugs, selling cannabis. So it's the interconnected issues that exist. And we don't have the Democratic leadership with that foresight, that truly sees that and understands that again, it's more than legislation. Because if you look at Illinois as a state, yes, we have extremely tough, gun legislation currently. But the states around us, like Indiana, like Wisconsin, so on and so forth, do not. So 60% of our guns come from out of state. It's an article written 3 years ago about trains coming into our train yards, lack of security, being filled with weapons, being broken into, and these weapons being stolen. And my dad said that used to happen when he was a shorty, when he was a young person. in the south on the south side of Chicago. So this is nothing new. So I think while we push for legislation, I personally believe that we need to treat guns like we treat automobiles. You need to get training, you need to be licensed, and you need to have insurance. We need to, of course, eliminate bump stocks. Which where was our Democratic leadership after Vegas? Like for a week, everybody was saying we're going to close that loophole, but again, they counted on the fickle nature of the public. We didn't even have Democratic leadership saying, "Hey, don't forget about bump stocks. Let's close this loophole." Universal background checks. We need to close these loopholes. A ban on, assault weapons. I was a military veteran. I've carried an M4. I've carried AK-47s and AR-15s. They're not weapons that I believe any civilian should be carrying around or hunter. So we need to push for that. But again, like you stated, we need to push for opportunity creation. How can we invest in our public school systems? We need to address how property taxes is inequitable, how it currently funds our public school systems. We need to stop privatizing our prison systems. We need to stop privatizing our educational systems. We need to end the war on drugs as a whole, legalize cannabis, so on and so forth. Push for vocational and trade programs, push for small business creation, co-ops, so on and so forth. So again, it's everything interconnected that I think will lead to a decrease in gun violence, because right now you have people that are hungry. Yes, there's accountability. You have to hold yourself accountable, but they're not eating. Okay. And at the end of the day, if somebody's not eating and they're trying to take care of themselves or their families, and there's a lack of opportunity that's systemic, sometimes what do you think is going to happen? They're going to take from you. And I think that's why you see a lot of gun violence occurring.
So I want to ask you, about 2 hours ago, before we recorded this, it came out that it's like that old record spinning. Alton Sterling, he was the Louisiana African American murdered, I believe, in 2 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, 2016. Yep.
Yeah, two police officers, came out that they're not going to be going to trial. That in the aftermath of Stephon Clark in Sacramento, just killed about a week and a half ago. And I mean, I could go down a list of all of them. It's a weird. I don't know how to ask the question because I'm kind of lost as a white guy what to do. I'm just disgusted as an African American, especially in Chicago. What's your response? It just seems like obviously this goes way back before Trump. It's not changing under Trump. What can people? Is there hope in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake. For me, at the end of the day, the systemic issues that we face. Like, I feel like the biggest ism of it all is capitalism. Like, honestly. So you have all these oppressive isms underneath capitalism that are utilized to keep us divided. Racism, sexism, ableism, classism, so on and so forth, for the most part. These oppressive isms. Because it's about money, power. It's about voting. So throughout history, blacks have been basically marginalized, basically looked at as subhuman to justify capitalism. Look at slavery, free labor. Oh, they're not human. They're not as intelligent as us. Look at how their bodies are structured. They're built for enslavement. They're built for work. Again, throughout history, this is how we have been viewed. And make no mistake, what Trump has done has taken the covert and made it more overt. But many of these viewpoints that blacks are less than has not left our nation, has not left society. Think about the teachers, the lawyers, the bankers, the politicians, the judges, the police officers throughout history who have held these viewpoints and covertly impacted society in this world. I mean, we just talked about redlining earlier. We could talk about Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, how an entire black community, self-sufficient black community, was burned to the ground. So throughout history, we have been viewed as subhuman. Now, we're a human species, and I believe in equality. I fight for all people, and I love all people. But we have to say Black Lives Matter for a reason, because we aren't valued in society. How, and I don't want to, actually I do. I don't even care if I scare people when I say this. It was interesting. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, right? Like, I was in class. We're on spring break right now. But I was talking to the class about the French Revolution. And one of my black students raised their hand and stated that, when is it going to be time for the next revolution? And think about how deep that is, that in 2018, I mean, I believe that we really have to start thinking about and looking at a real live revolution. People have to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, what are they willing to risk and sacrifice? Because I'm tired. Like, I'm tired, and so many other people are tired. It's no longer enough to attend a march over the weekend, take a few pictures, pat yourself on the back, post it on Facebook, and you get a few likes and call yourself an activist. But then Monday through Friday, you go back and work within the same system that has led to the various forms of oppression that you're fighting against. Like, when is enough going to be enough? As a black man, when I walk out my damn door, I mean, Stephon Clark, he had a cell phone. I could be shot for a cell phone. I could be shot for having a hoodie on. Trayvon Martin. I mean, in my car, Philando Castile, being in my vehicle. We are an endangered group of individuals, and we are not valued. Like, and the public has to see this. You can no longer tie yourself to a narrative. Oh, he should have complied. Oh, why didn't she just listen to the officer? When we're marching against gun violence, it has to include gun violence at the hands of police that black men and women are facing, and black youth, because it's a huge issue. It's a systemic issue. So for me, it's the number one issue. I'm fighting for everybody, but as a black man, as a black male in society, I'm tired, and I'm tired of being afraid. But then when I speak up, or we speak up, it's a problem. It's an issue. People say, "Oh, you can't kneel," or you can't say this, or you can't do that. So we can't even express ourselves appropriately. Black Lives Matter trying to be identified as a terrorist organization. We can't even express ourselves in an appropriate manner because individuals want to say, you have to protest when it's comfortable and convenient for us. So I feel like at this point, man, I'm calling to all people. When it comes to black lives, when it comes to women's rights, when it comes to everything that we're fighting for, immigrant rights, like we seriously have to get to the point where our job isn't that important. Where this little, our savings, our life insurance policies, traveling, going to Disneyland means absolutely nothing until everybody is free. And that's how I'm built. Like, I'm on spring break. I'm out in these streets. Like, I'm going out to grind. I'm not taking vacation. Why am I taking vacation when another black man was murdered at the hands of the police department and we don't receive justice? When our children are being murdered at a daily rate, when mass shootings are occurring, when there's people literally starving because they can't make a living wage. I mean, there's so much going on in this world. So for me, it's just like, we got to wake up, man. We got to ask ourselves, when is enough enough? Like, when is our revolution? When are we going to be willing to risk the sacrifice at all, so that people can have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I mean, it's everywhere. It's interconnected. I mean, I don't know if you saw this in Miami. They're talking about teachers can't afford to pay rent or mortgages within the areas so they're going to build small housing on school grounds. I mean, like, what type of ish is that? We can't afford a living wage. So, I mean, gun violence is interconnected, man. We're not valued. And when we're out there trying to make a difference, when we're out there trying to do the right thing, we're gunned down. But then when some of us, who is not just black people, but when some of us are out there not doing the right thing, it's still us that are targeted incorrectly and gunned down. But somehow, those biases don't exist with other individuals for the most part, and they can be peacefully arrested, peacefully apprehended, or talked down. I mean, look at the drug epidemic. When crack hit, what was it? It was reactive, war on drugs, incarcerate, punish them. But now that it's an opioid crisis, which is a huge issue, I care about it, but the faces have changed. Now it's upper middle class white families. Now all of a sudden this is a public health crisis. We need to be proactive. We need to look at education and rehabilitation and training. Again, what do you think that says to black people and minority people as a whole? You know what I'm saying? The March for Our Lives. I work with youth, and shout out to the youth I work with for March for Our Lives and the work that they're doing, because they put in the effort to make it intersectional and empower those who are voiceless. Why did it take a mass shooting, which is horrible, but we're losing black and brown kids on a daily basis? Black and brown mothers are crying on a daily basis, but the news doesn't give a damn. So it's a huge issue, So I hate to say it, I'm not surprised, but we internalize it, man. And when are we going to be valued to the point where people give a damn and care, and we can seek justice and expect justice like our white brothers and sisters and anyone else in this world that deserves justice? So it's a huge issue.
Well, as I end, I'm not going to say much to that because I think you said it beautifully, actually. I think it's also important that we understand there are there's obviously political activism, but there's also a need to create a new media system. You know, I think that obviously, full disclosure, I'm launching in the beginning stages of launching my own network. We got it out, business plan out to a few people, but I think that although there's a great space for the Jimmy Dores of the world, and regardless of what happened, the Young Turks and things like that, I think we need a media that's actually going to get out to those streets that you're talking about in Illinois, and to focus on the things that are not sexy, like the gentrification or the lack of health care, or what you just said in Miami, which I didn't even know about, that they're building houses attached to schools. I mean, we need media that actually shows it, because I think the only way to really change things is it's a multi-pronged thing. It's political activism and new candidates, but also awaken more people the fuck up, which is part of the role of media. So I hope through podcasts like this, I hope through in the field reporting, again, the supporters that are supporting me, patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. That's not going so I could eat. That's going so I can get back in the field. I think we need media that actually says, you know what, this isn't about growing to 5 million Twitter followers or climbing a ladder. Certainly not about making a lot of money, because you're not going to do that as an independent journalist. But we need media that wants to show what you're talking about.
No question. And that's why I think, media like yourself, because again, how many people are going to cover Stormy Daniels? Like, yeah, great. It's newsworthy. But we're facing storms, like real storms in Chicago and other places. Like, it's easy to go to a third world country issue, but we have like third world situations in the United States of America. So we need media outlets like this that don't just chase the huge story, for clicks and for views, that are truly, like Standard Rock, the work done in Standard Rock, like that work needs to be done, because I feel like so many individuals in this country are well-meaning, like they care about the progressive movement, but they're still in a bubble. Like they really, because they don't go into certain areas. Like I know people that don't go east into Austin community or west into Maywood or south into Inglewood. So they haven't seen for themselves. And I think it changes things and helps to build bridges and helps to identify the importance of intersectionality when media exposes it for individuals and they can see for themselves the type of shit that's going on in this world that needs to be changed, man. So, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And how can people keep tabs on you before you run again? Where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely, man. I'm a friendly person. You can add me to Facebook, even though I don't know Facebook right now with this garbage that's going on. May have to rethink having a profile. But Anthony Clark on Facebook, my nonprofit Suburban Unity Alliance. We have a website. We're doing a lot of work in the community that will continue. So just check on us. Like I say, Anthony Clark. Instagram, Twitter, whatever. We're doing this work. It doesn't stop. I just didn't do this for votes. We're doing this to change the world, man. So.
Thank you for joining me, man. Look forward to getting back with you when I'm in the Chicago neighborhood. Thanks again.
All right. Good, bud.
Bye-bye.